Ole Miss is a top 10 team. Ole Miss is a 10-point dog. Nobody is giving the Rebels a chance to win this game. That's kind of just what we want, right?
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's Jase medical.com. All right, we got a lot of stuff to get to. There's some interesting stuff. We need to rail about whatever that comedian with Ole Miss ties that they put up that was completely unfunny. Got up there and just completely slammed her alma mater, which I'm assuming she thought that was cute and funny, but it's basically going to come across that everybody with an Ole Miss name tag attached to their name is going to be looking down on this person. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast pregame show. We're going to be joined, hopefully, by John Macon Gillespie over the course of the next hour. He's having connectivity issues at the moment, but we're going to try and press on as well. We've got a lot of stuff going on in this weekend's football game. The Georgia Bulldogs, Ole Miss Rebels, Athens, Georgia, ESPN, Sirius XM channel 192 if you're interested in such things like that for the Ole Miss hometown broadcast. Now, you have an interesting situation in this football game. You just do. You have Georgia, which for all intents and purposes, them and Alabama are like in between college football and professional football. So whenever they rise up and they decide to get really fired up, there's not a whole lot that you can do about it. I mean, that's just the sad truth. But I will say this to Ole Miss fans. You want Georgia up. You don't want to catch Georgia down. You do not want to catch the same Georgia that Auburn played. You want Georgia to be at their absolute best and have a measuring stick of exactly where you are and how far you have to go to get to the top of the mountain. Because Georgia's at the top of the mountain right now. They just are. So you have to figure out what you need to do to get there. So you want Georgia at their best. You want Brock Bowers to play. You want Mims to play. You want Georgia to be playing their absolute best. And you want to see how you match up with them when you play your best. Again, this game, if Georgia wins this game, it's not going to affect Ole Miss at all. Not one bit, other than eliminating Ole Miss from the playoff, which is not necessarily like you're telling me it's a chance long shot, but you're 6% out of 100 to get into the tournament at this point. It goes up considerably if you win this game, but I mean, that's the issue we're dealing with right now. Ole Miss competing against the Georgia Bulldogs, taking this team to the wire, trying to figure out how to get stops defensively, trying to figure out how to score points against that defense offensively, and get the game into the fourth quarter and watch Georgia tighten up. If Ole Miss is ahead with 5 minutes to go in the game, watch Georgia tighten up. Because this is the thing that nobody wants to talk about. Georgia can withstand one loss, as long as that isn't in the SEC championship game, potentially. But they can probably get away with one loss and still make the playoff. But if that loss comes to Ole Miss and you have to start facing your mortality with a road trip at Tennessee, with an SEC championship game versus Alabama, and all of your goals start becoming a guarantee that you're going to be able to compete for them, to we're not so sure about that anymore. Two, we don't know exactly how that's going to look. Watch this team tighten up. I like Carson Beck. I like Kendall Milton, Ra Thomas, Dominic Lovett, Brock Bowers when he plays. Brock Bowers is an alien. Georgia's defense, technically sound. They may not be the rolling ball of butcher knives that the Georgia Bulldogs have been in past years. They're still very, very, very good. Like I said, when it comes to this roster and Alabama's roster, you're looking at somewhere between college football and the NFL. It's just the way it works out. I'm not saying they're unbeatable. They are beatable. I've quoted the movie Miracle all week. All week I've quoted that movie. And just a second. Computer isn't working either. Let me text John real quick. Let's see. He's having computer issues at the moment. And he's going to try and come in just a little bit. So I'm just sending a text message real quick. All right. Again, in the chat, do me a favor. Put in there where you're listening or watching from. So we have that available as well. You can't comment on Twitter. That's a streamer issue. That's not a Twitter issue. Go to the YouTube page. You'd be able to comment. I think you'll be able to comment on the Facebook page. And you'd be commenting on the Twitch page. You just can't do it on Twitter for whatever reason. It's probably an API issue with Elon and all of that stuff. But this is going to be a real football game for Ole Miss. This is a real measuring stick. Everybody should be excited. I woke up like 4 times last night because it's Christmas morning. And it has nothing to do with whether or not Ole Miss wins necessary or loses the game. I want to see how Ole Miss stacks up. I know Georgia is going to be jacked up. I know that they're going to want to do it. Brock Bowers is going to come on the field at some point, okay? Everybody needs to expect that. Brock Bowers is going to come on the field at some point, and the stadium is going to pop. There's going to be an energy built up in that stadium that there's not a whole lot that you can do about that. Ole Miss has to withstand that. Ole Miss needs to get to the fourth quarter of the game, either 3 or 4 points behind or 3 or 4 points ahead, and say, hey, Jackson, win this game. So I'm really excited about that, and we're going to do basically a whole bunch of talking about what's going on, because that's an interesting part for me. I genuinely think that if you get up on this Georgia team in the fourth quarter, they're going to play tight once they start facing the reality of losing their goals. Whenever Georgia thinks they're going to be able to just win the game at the fourth quarter and everything's in front of them and they can play completely loose, because that is what has happened to this Georgia team thus far. They're good. They're a rolling ball of butcher knives, just like I say. But whenever they actually have to face the missing of some of their goals, how will they react? How will Carson Beck react when he's not playing 7-on-7 out there? Georgia's offensive line is probably the best offensive line that Ole Miss is going to see all season. Most of the games this year, Carson Beck has played 7-on-7. So what happens if Ole Miss can get him to drop his eyes, get him off of his spot? Carson Beck's a good enough athlete. He's a throw-first quarterback, but he's a good enough athlete. What happens in that scenario? What happens on Georgia's defensive line where they do matchups, and they proudly brag about doing matchups, to where on passing situations, they bring in their pass rush specialist. And on rundown situations, they bring in their run specialist, and they match that up because their front seven isn't what it has been in the past few years. Well, what happens when tempo gets going and you can't make that sub? And all of a sudden your run stopper is in there when Ole Miss is going straight down the field. Georgia is potentially starting a true freshman at middle linebacker today. Ole Miss does a ton of deception. Ole Miss's offense is a key buster. They use your keys against you. And whenever you're just learning the defense, you're very key specific. So it should be easier to deceive a true freshman. This is going to be a big matchup in this game. If Georgia wins this game, it is because that true freshman had a really good game and had a performance to where he has basically done enough to where that secondary can work, because Georgia's secondary is pretty good indeed. John Macon sent a text message a few minutes ago. He's running a little bit behind. We have Joshua Triplett checking in. Just turned off game day to watch the show from Utah. You got Mike Vandegrift from Blue Mountain, Mississippi as well. So thank you very much for tuning in. Good situation for Ole Miss. There's not a bad situation in the cards for Ole Miss football. There's not. You just have a situation to where if you win the game, you have basically all your goals in front of you. If you lose this game, you still have 99% of your goals and pretty much every one of the goals that you had going into this season. We got extra stuff. Ole Miss has moved up over the course of the season of what they wanted and what they expected. Just has. I think it was after the Alabama game, I was listening to podcasts and everybody's like, this is a 6-win team. You remember that? This team was terrible. I would have taken under when I did W's and L's, and just completely doing that. The first opportunity they had to turn on this team, they did. Ole Miss responded by beating LSU, by beating Auburn, by beating Arkansas, by beating Vanderbilt, and setting up this game to where they're 8-1 against the Georgia Bulldogs. And like I said, Georgia is basically a semi-pro team. I've quoted Miracle this week. I've seen Braveheart quoted. I've got quotes from Rocky IV. That shows you the way this steps up. But in both of those instances, in all of those instances, it's about an underdog that was able to pull it off in the end. So, John said this on his end of the things, but I told him to come in when he can. So this is a big deal, and I've talked all week, and we're going to go over my keys and kind of do a past refresher in just a little bit and talk about that. The keys to victory, what do we need to watch for, and why I think Ole Miss can win this game. Those are the three things we're going to go over today, and if John Macon can get into broadcast, he will. But I do want to let everybody know that today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home your winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors have got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride or your money back every single time. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. College football season is here, and this season Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On College Football Kickoff. Each Friday, Locked On will go live at 11 a.m. Eastern on every college YouTube channel, including this one. College Football Kickoff Live will cover playoff implications, the conference rivalry games, and go in depth like only Locked On can, including insight and analysis from our stable of Locked On hosts covering their team every day. Find Locked On College Football Kickoff Live every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern on any Locked On College YouTube channel. You will not want to miss it. And people that, if you want to look around the Locked On Ole Miss YouTube channel, I was there. The game of the week was the breakdown there. And we actually have a clip of that we put up on our website. So go to our YouTube page and you can check that out. Also, thank you so much for getting us over 5,000 subscriptions. We're closing in on 5,300 at the moment. So thank you for that. That's important because once we get to 6,000, we're going to start doing remote broadcasts. Once we get to 7,000, we're going to start with a call-in show if that is possible. It's going to be really cool. So if you have subscribed, please tell a friend. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And if you listen to the show on one of the other podcast mediums, go over to the YouTube page and give us a subscription as well. We'd appreciate it very much. All right. So really, really important stuff. This game has a chance to be really real. By the way, Penn State forced Michigan to punt the opening drive. Remember everybody talking about how Michigan has no chance of being stopped today. I think all of that. I think Penn State was up for this game too. Kentucky and Alabama is doing Kentucky and Alabama things. Illinois is about to score a touchdown. And I think Georgia Tech just punted to Clemson. That's my quad box. Put in the chat what your quad box are. What 4 games are you watching if you're on YouTube TV? What games are you paying attention to as well? We've got some more thing. DYL the Young says Batesville, Mississippi. Joe Cannon says you just got to believe hotty toddy. Exactly. You have to believe. And he's also said he's in Lumberton, which, by the way, I know Lumberton fairly well. I used to drive down to when I went to Hattiesburg from McGee. I went through that area quite a bit of time. And ST Weasel is in Boulder City, Nevada. That's what I am talking about, out in the desert. How close to Vegas is that, if you don't mind me asking, ST Weasel? Put that in the comment for me. It feels like that's either going to be an outskirt of Reno or Vegas in that state. So I'm curious about that. Now, and Sean Neeson said he's from Brandon, Mississippi. Yes, as somebody that went to elementary school with Faith Hill at McLaurin Attendance Center. Welcome, Sean. All right. So, all right. Let's see. I need to take the comment off. 20 miles from Vegas, ST Weasel says. That's pretty cool. All right. We are going to have a game of games tonight, and it's going to be really fun. And I do want to talk to everybody about these are what I went over all week. These are why Ole Miss wins this game, and I'm going to explain that. And if you listen to the podcast, some of this is going to be redundant, but it's probably also redundant because I believe it, if that makes sense. One, I think Ole Miss is due for that special once every 10-year type of wins. Ole Miss hasn't really done that since the Alabama game in 2015. There's been a couple times they came close. They couldn't exactly finish the deal. We are due for that performance, and this year kind of feels like that team. Honestly, this year, it feels like the 2008 season towards the end of the year when everything, we just kind of felt inevitable. And I think that is interesting as well. Number 2, I think the stars are going to shine for Ole Miss football. You're going to hear from Jackson Dart. Quinshon Judkins is going to have a day. Trey Harris, and also somebody like Caden Prieskorn or Jordan Watkins is probably going to step up as well. And last of all, not least, the defense makes just enough stops to win the game. And this game, I don't think it's going to be like the LSU game, okay? I don't know if it's going to be like LSU, but I do think there's going to be an up and down component of this football game. This Georgia team it's kind of interesting, but this is an offensive football team. It just really is. It's an offensive football team. And if you're not careful, Georgia can just outscore you and beat you down that way. They still have the great defense. Like I said, this is like an NFL roster playing college football. But you need to be able to move the ball against this defense. You need to be able to score. You remember that feeling that Ole Miss fans got in 2020 against Alabama? And I realized that Ole Miss lost that game. But for 3 quarters, Ole Miss went toe-to-toe with them. Alabama couldn't stop them. All of that stuff. Ole Miss needs a performance offensively probably similar to that. And you have the defensive coordinator that is finally hired to make that stop. And if you can make that stop and you can get ahead, because that Alabama game, Ole Miss lost that game because they just couldn't get that stop. If you can make that stop and kind of break serve, for a tennis analogy, all of a sudden you're the one that's got the ball with a chance to go at 14 points. And if you can put that away, it's going to be problematic for the Georgia Bulldogs, and I don't care who they are. Now, if you look at what to watch for in this game, I think Quinshon Judkins will be the barometer of how this game goes offensively. And what I mean by that is it's going to be important for him to do a workman-like performance. Now, if you think about the Auburn game, Jarquez Hunter had 17 carries for 59 yards. Most of Auburn's running came from the quarterback position, and I do think that is going to be important in this game. But Quinshon Judkins at being a barometer, stay with it. Eventually, if you can keep those linebackers honest, it's going to make the play action passes more effective and open some stuff up for Jordan Watkins and open some stuff up for Caden Prescorn. Ole Miss must stay on schedule in this game. This is an elite Georgia third down defense, like third in the country. Ole Miss needs to stay on schedule. If Ole Miss has a bunch of 3rd and 7 to 3rd and 10s, be worried, because that tells you exactly how this game is going. And also, this is going to be the best offensive line that Ole Miss football plays. It sounds weird to say, but there's times when Carson Beck is standing back there playing the equivalent of 7-on-7. And Ole Miss has to figure out a way to affect him and to make him nervous back there with the ball. Kendall Milton, all these players, they're good players. Georgia, like I said, Georgia's been an offensive team kind of this year. But your only hope is to affect a first-year starting quarterback to where he plays like a first-year starting quarterback. And this is a night game. They're going to be jacked. It's senior night, the whole 9 yards. It's going to be a major, major big deal. The place is going to be juiced. You heard game day. Although Georgia's sign game, by the way, was sad. When you brag about educational standards, when you brag about something like that, at least do better than Jackson Dart and Jackson Shart. At least give me something better than that. At least give me something with a little bit of creativity. The Georgia sign game was really similar to the Ole Miss comedian girl game. Neither one of them were particularly funny. I mean, basically all Georgia had at game day was barking. And maybe it was the weather, maybe the creative people, they weren't about coming into the game. But I don't know. The sign game at Georgia was pretty rough. By the way, Alabama scored a touchdown on Kentucky, so this game's probably over as well, which that is going to be fine as well. Because SEC West, whenever LSU got beat in that game, the SEC West was kind of done for at that point. Zach Tyler says, I hope we go in there and play like a top 10 team and doesn't look rattled. Yes, I want the absolute best that Georgia has. I want to see exactly where Ole Miss is when they play their best and Georgia plays their best. I do not want Ole Miss to give games away. I want to see a legit football game, and let's just let the cards fall where they may. Georgia is a really good football team. Georgia is not an unbeatable football team. Joshua Tripp at game day was damn near unwatchable today, was trending that way this year, but man, that was embarrassing. Yeah, game day was a hard watch. And they're doing so much where they're playing to the crowd now. And I think they get that from Pat McAfee. They just play to the crowd so much that you've kind of lost what made game day so enjoyable to begin with. And that was them going from game to game and actually breaking that down and talking about what needs to happen. This year is just basically, I don't know, is a situation where they talk about Michigan, which they should talk about Michigan, which, by the way, that's a joke that Michigan's response to the Big Ten is that this is unfair and that the Big Ten is singling Michigan out for being unfair when this is not fair to the student athletes at Michigan, when all of Michigan is being accused of, to where they've actually giving proof to the Big Ten that it's happened, of Michigan doing things that make it unfair for the rest of the collegiate athletes in the Big Ten. It's fraudulent. It's fraudulent. And Penn State, I mean, we all might need a shower after this, but Penn State is America's team today. Penn State is absolutely America's team right now. It is. Oh, it's rough. It's absolutely rough. So let's talk for just a second about some other stuff. We did what to watch for. We're going to do keys now. The keys of the game, in my opinion, I think this is Jackson Dart and Quinshon Judkins' game. And you're going to need both of them to have dang near their best game at Ole Miss. However they've done it, they need their best performance to happen here. And that is because of how good Georgia's defense is and how both of them functioning at a high level will affect things, if that makes sense at all. Number two, Ole Miss must put together its first complete game of the season. Ole Miss has not played a complete game. There was LSU where they played offense for 4 quarters. There was a couple of games where they played defense for 4 quarters. They have not played a complete game. They have to put together a complete game today. And I think the Rebels need to believe they are going to win and not just hope that they are going to win. Teams that hope they're going to win, the first time things go wrong, they go into their shell. It's that thing where you see the extreme version of it whenever you have a coach that's about to get fired and everybody knows that coach is about to get fired. The first bad thing, all of a sudden, everything, they get in their own feels. So that should be interesting as well. John DeLeon, hey, justice for Yankee cheaters. John is an LSU fan, by the way. He is a follower of SEC After Dark and of the channel. Willis says Dart doesn't have to win, but he cannot succumb to the noise and lights. And yeah, Dart needs to look like he belongs. That's absolutely the case. Ole Miss needs to look like they belong. And we're not playing the moral victory game here. If Ole Miss loses the game, they lose the game. Georgia has somewhere in the 70s and 4- and 5-star players, just like Alabama. If Ole Miss loses the game, they lose the game. How they lose the game is going to be more important than if they lose the game. Now, if Ole Miss wins the game, because Ole Miss can win the game. Again, there's a difference between can, should, and will. Ole Miss can win this football game. It's going to be important that Ole Miss puts out a performance that the whole nation can see and be proud of, because it's going to affect the brand down the road. Zach Tyler says, yes, hit it right on the head. We need to go in there and believe we are going to win. Yeah, there's a major difference between hope and believe. And I'm sorry. I just saw one of the worst fake punt calls I've ever seen in my life, I think. And I want to see that he didn't get it before I'm sure about that. Yes, he did not get it. Clemson faked a punt from their own 20-yard line, and Georgia Tech stopped them. So now Georgia Tech's basically in the red zone. Absolutely nuts. John says, I think Ole Miss needs at least one long pass to play to a wide receiver and to win the turnover battle if the Rebels are going to win the game. Yes, that pretty much dead on. And Ole Miss needs to avoid 3rd and 7 longer like the plague. Georgia is really good at playing down and distance football. They're really, really good at that. So, see, we'll take a quick break real quick. And I just want to let you know that this show is brought to you by Jace Medical. We spend a lot of time talking together, you and I, and we get fired up together on wins and losses, who starts and sits. I'm thankful that for the connection that we have. And today I want to chat to you something a little bit more personal. That's actually a lot more personal. I just learned that you can get a 1 year supply on ED medications. You realize what that means? That means bring on extensive travel, bring on the next natural disaster, supply chain issues, that thing, you are covered, my friend. You don't have to worry about whether or not you can refill your generics for Cialis, Viagra, or Rivalto. And this is possible because of our friend at Jace Medical. Go online right now at jacemedical.com and receive your 12-month supply on your daily medication. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. As a verified customer once said about Jace, I am thankful for this service. Supply chain issues caused me to cut pills in half to have it. I ordered most of my daily meds with a year supply. I also ordered an antibiotic kit. I feel secure now. Prices are lower than local pharmacies, and I highly recommend this for everyone. If you or someone you love would go get some peace of mind by having a year supply of a daily med, go to jacemedical.com to see if it's offered to you. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase at Jace Medical, JASE medical.com. Also, the Rebels play the Georgia Bulldogs tonight. It's a chance to listen to David Kellum and the Rebels' hometown crew as Ole Miss looks to continue their run. You can catch every play of the Rebels' home team broadcast with SiriusXM on channel 192 or on the SXM app. Search Ole Miss Rebels. All right. So we are, we're in it at the moment. We're talking about what needs to be happening and all of this stuff like this. And let me check the chat real quick to make sure that I'm there. Mike Vandegrift says we find a way to win. And Sean Neeson says defense needs to play close to the line of scrimmage to take away the underneath stuff. Yes, the Georgia passing-wise is not the most explosive offense in the world. Penn State's down to about the 10-yard line right now, by the way. They're not the most explosive in the world, but they do have the athletes to be explosive, if that makes sense. I think they're not explosive by choice. Zach Tyler asks, over-under for Quinshawn getting 120 yards. Right now, I'd go under. Honestly, I think it would be like a 20 for 90 yards type game and a touchdown. I think it's more important for what he can open up, and that teams have to respect them. Georgia Tech just took the lead on the Clemson Tigers 6-7-0. Georgia Tech's turning out to be a good little win, by the way. So let's talk about this real quick. Let's see. Georgia's in the red zone. Georgia in the red zone. These are their numbers. So we'll turn that off a second. 63% in the red zone. 70% touchdowns on defense. So this is what this means is every time Georgia gets in the red zone on offense, they score 63% of the time. And every time they get into the red zone against them, whenever they're on defense, teams are scoring 70% of the time against that unit. This is a weapon that Ole Miss can exploit in this game. This is going to be a situation real similar to what Texas A&M provided, to where tempo and Georgia's need to match up the Ole Miss offense and the middle linebacker that's kind of new to the scene. This is a situation that Ole Miss can take advantage, if that makes sense. Something to pay attention to as well. When you look at Georgia's defense through 9 games, they've only had 19 sacks. That's about, 2.5 sacks per game, something like that. Through 9 games, it's about a little over 2 sacks a game. Tackles for loss is at 47. They have about 5 tackles for loss per game. This is that Georgia defense. Like I said, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis is not walking through that door if you are a Georgia fan. Now, if you look at the other side, this is Ole Miss's red zone offense. They're better in the red zone than the Georgia Bulldogs, and they're better in the red zone than the Georgia Bulldogs on defense. They score touchdowns 65% of the time, and they give up touchdowns 64% of the time. At least you're in positive water in that situation as well. Ole Miss's defense this year, 31 sacks on the season. That's good enough for number 5 in college football. And tackles for loss wise, Ole Miss is at 66. That's good enough for 13th in college football. So Ole Miss in this position is in pretty good shape. And somebody that I think everybody needs to pay attention to in this game is Jared Ivey. Jared Ivey in this game, and the Georgia Tech group entirely, we need to pay attention. But Jared Ivey's got 33 tackles on the year, 8 TFLs, and a 5.5 sacks. That's a situation that'll hunt. He's leading the team in sacks and TFLs. Now, you're like, hey, Steve, you mentioned the Georgia Tech philosophy or the Georgia Tech crew. What does that necessarily mean? Well, the main thing that means is Georgia Tech players, Zamari Walton, Jared Ivey, Akello Stone, they're all Georgia Tech players who have spent the better part of their career playing Georgia, basically guaranteed to lose the game, to where covering the game is enough. You just want to cover the game against that team. There's no chance of you actually winning the game. There's muscle memory that has been suited up for these 3 players over several years at Georgia Tech, to where this Georgia game is probably the game that they most want to win on the schedule. It doesn't matter about Mississippi State, LSU, the whole 9 yards. You want to win this game against Georgia because of what it meant to you previously, the hurt that they caused you and your friends previously. I know that Miss Tracy Ivey She's probably really fired up about today because she sat over there and watched Georgia do what they did to Georgia Tech. Same things for Miss Walton. Same thing for Miss Stone. They're going to be paying attention. Those players are going to be really up for this football game. And 2 defensive linemen that are really up, and along with the athletic defensive linemen that Ole Miss has, that tells me that you're in a pretty good way and pretty good things can happen. Alabama just scored another touchdown. They're kind of turning into a rolling ball of butcher knives at the moment. Let's see. Daniel Parker, what up, Willis? Catching up on some work before going to the game tonight. Before the game tonight, hoping Ole Miss can shock the world. Yeah, exactly. Hey, is you're starting OT out with a broken foot practice? That is the rumor, Primetime. We don't know about injuries. The way this works is they break it, everybody freaks out about it, and then it's rarely as bad as it said. I do not expect Micah Pettis to play tonight. But against Georgia, I'm not going to say that that's necessarily going to be a good thing. But going with Victor Kern moving over to right tackle and Jalen Williams that started at left tackle last year is probably more athletically gifted enough to handle the Georgia front more than the previous offensive line was. Micah Pettis is a loss. Don't hear me that it's not. I just don't know if it's that big of a loss that some people will think. Zach Tyler says, Willis, I think Pete calls a good game today. Usually when he calls a bad game, he does good the next week. I agree with that as well. I think Ole Miss is going to be really juiced up for this game because Ole Miss has been thinking about this game for pretty much 3 weeks. Georgia is going to be super hyper keyed on Q. Ulysses Bentley has a big game. The player that I think that Ole Miss needs to watch out for, that I think Georgia, there could be a problem with the Georgia Dogs, and you could see them getting off. I think Caden Prescorn and Jordan Watkins, both of those are in position to have a good day. I think Trey Harris is going to get so much attention. Georgia's going to have to bracket him some. They're going to be paying attention about Quinshon. All of a sudden, they're going to take advantage of what's going on. And Primetime Dog, I'm not doubting it's going to be a problem. It's not going to be as big of a problem as you think it's going to be. Ole Miss's offensive line is pretty good through about 8 players. Now, you having Mims back. You having Mims back is going to be a problem for Ole Miss. That's more of a problem than Pettis being out. It's Mims being back playing. Because Carson Beck, they have to affect Carson Beck in this game, period. There's no way to do this in any other way to where Carson Beck being clean is going to be problematic for Ole Miss. If 70% rain holds, then how much does it improve our chances, hotty toddy? I think it improves it some, actually. And the reason I think it makes it improve, because both Ole Miss and Georgia's run game is going to be fine. You're going to be able to handle that. But in the pass game, Ole Miss is a little bit more explosive. And I think the defense is the one that's actually at the disadvantage whenever you're playing on a wet field. And I think Trey Harris, I think Jordan Watkins, I think that Georgia might have trouble fitting gaps and not doing it as easily as they normally do. I think rain benefits Ole Miss. Although, like I said, Georgia's a rolling ball of butcher knives. It just is what it is. You kind of have to take advantage of what they have, but there's not a lot to take advantage of. They're number 2 and should be number 1 in the country. And they've won back-to-back national championships, and they have not lost a night home game since 2009. Since Houston Nutt had not even taken Ole Miss to back-to-back Cotton Bowls. It's been a minute. So everybody needs to understand what's happening in this football game. This really is a Rocky versus Drago type situation. This really is a miracle type situation, as in the miracle on ice, not necessarily needing a miracle. Ole Miss can win the game. They can. This isn't even a situation to where it's a real upset. They probably have the best chance to beat Georgia that Georgia's seen this season. But understand the task that's at hand. I think they're up for it, honestly. Facebook user says, "Amen. Jared Ivey is dying to get out against Georgia, like you said, as he did his whole life. He points to any game against Georgia. Now in this atmosphere, look out. I may have a bigger game than anyone." He knows these Georgia players. Yeah, it's him, Akella Stone, and Zamari Walton. Those are 3 names to watch for. They want this. They need this game. Like I said, it might not matter because if Georgia comes out and plays like 5 stars, they come out and play like 5 stars. But all you can do is put yourself in the best position to win the game. And I think Ole Miss is in position to do that. Matt YouTube says, "We must get the short cast game going instead of only going deep out routes all the time." You preaching to the choir there, Matt. We've talked about that all the time. Ole Miss has to stay on schedule this game. Jamie Meredith says, I'm telling you, you're right. I think I not only will play huge, he will have our entire team fired up. I think there's some stuff to be said for that. Jared Ivey has such a leadership position on this team. People listen to him when he talks, and they're probably going to take a cue off of him for as fired up as he is going to be. Glenn Breland says, "Ole Miss cannot use the soft zone. They've used you need to bend but don't break against Georgia. Honestly, you need to get after the quarterback. Do not give up explosive plays. They're good players. You can't just man up them. You can't press them. You're going to have to mix it up. There's going to have to be soft zone. There's going to have to be some man thrown in there. If you do the same thing over and over again, no matter what you do, it's a suicide mission." Nick Lambert said, "Rain might help with the crowd noise, even if it's just a little bit." Yeah, that's true. I mean, because I do think Georgia's going to be jacked up. Mims won't play more than 20 snaps, probably less. Our right tackle is our starting guard. Okay. Yeah, that situation, both teams' right tackles, like I said, Jordan Watkins supposedly broke his hand before the Auburn game. And he was going to be out for the whole season, and everybody talked about it, and everybody freaked out, and everything happened. Jordan Watkins played against Auburn. Jordan Watkins has not missed a game. He hurt his hand. He did hurt his hand, but he played. So I just don't know if you need to look at it as a situation to where you know for sure what's going to happen. I think Micah Pettis being out will definitely be a loss. I'm not saying it's not. I just don't want to, I don't know, put expectations on that when we don't know the true story. Maybe you should, Jonathan Lenz, maybe you should play James Brown Living in America before the game, before pump up Rocky and Ole Miss. John, that was Apollo came up to that and the Russian killed him. So I don't know if you were trying to play a game with me there, but if you wanted to do it right, it would be me playing Hearts on Fire or something like that. Jason Boatner says, "I'm calling on Wade to ball out. He wanted to be a dog, but never got a call." Oh, that's right. Dayton Wade wanted Georgia to go. Yes, that is a good call, Jason. I have not thought about that all week. That is a very good call. Any players in the timeline that y'all want to talk about real quick? Who do you think is going to be the difference maker? Who do you think is going to be the key player? And don't just say Jackson Dart, because everybody knows Jackson Dart, but that's the main thing. I'm calling on Wade. Jason thought of something that I do this and think about this most every day for several hours a day. And I just didn't, that never crossed my mind. I never put 2 and 2 together. It's interesting. I think JJ Pegues is probably a little bit up for this game because JJ Pegues played at Auburn. Auburn, the Deep South oldest rivalry is against Georgia. So there's a little scar tissue there potentially as well. So it should be pretty interesting. All right. I am going to get out of here and let everybody know. Everybody enjoy their game. Rebs Mania says Prescorn will be a factor. Yes. I think Prescorn and Watkins are the 2 to watch in this game. Matt YouTube says, why don't we run more rub routes? That I don't know. I think you're going to see them tonight, though, honestly. College Game Day picked Georgia unanimously across the board. If we can go to Athens and sign it's 95, in the first 7 minutes. It will be huge. Yeah, everybody was going to take Georgia in this game. Georgia is a back-to-back national championship winner. Daniel Parker, Prescone is the difference maker in the red zone today. Tennyson is going to have his hands full covering Bowers, but I think he has a good day. I don't think Bowers is going to play a real game. I think Bowers is going to get a curtain call because it's senior night. I do not anticipate Bowers playing that much. Maybe 10 to 15 snaps. It'll be real similar to what Trey Harris did against Alabama, is my bet. But who knows? Brock Bowers is an alien. Who knows? And whoever is guarding McConkey, it needs to be on their game because he's just been that dude. He has just been that dude. Anyway, thank you very much for tuning in, and thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Remember, listen to the Ole Miss Hometown broadcast on SiriusXM, channel 192. Check the game out on ESPN at 6 o'clock Central tonight. It's on ESPN 4K. It's on the 4K channel if you have YouTube TV. So I'll get to see the Rebs in 4K tonight. Should be a lot of fun. If you're going to the game, if you're on the road over to Athens right now, please be safe. Do whatever you can do to get there. Should be a lot of fun indeed. This is the measuring stick game. This is the game that Ole Miss fans have been waiting 40 years for. Not the LSU game, not even the Alabama game. This is the measuring stick game. We're at the point where if Ole Miss is going to move up to the next echelon, the next tier, the next level, they need to win one of these games on the road. Georgia, Alabama, those teams win games on the road. Ole Miss has been to 4. It's going to be 4 out of 10 Access Bowls they've been to. 4 years out of 10, they've been to an Access Bowl. That's pretty heady stuff. That's 2 different head coaches, even a probation in the middle. It's time to move up to that next level. Take your free shot, play loose, do what needs to be done, and go up against what I think is the best college football team in the country. And if you beat this team, they're going to be talking about you for 2 weeks. You're going to be all of a sudden, the game against Alabama, you're going to be telling everybody how injured you were. So much good can happen with a win tonight. Nothing bad can happen. So let's see how it goes. Anyway, take care. We'll see you tomorrow. Hotty toddy.